You are listening to The Vocal Technologist. Spoken tech for your ears.
70% of code pull requests at Uber are now attributed to AI agents. Let that land.
Yeah, it is a staggering number to try and wrap your head around, honestly.
Yeah.
It fundamentally alters the mechanical reality of what we think of as software engineering.
Welcome to Vocal Technologist. I mean, if you're an entry-level dev listening to this, that Uber stat probably makes your stomach drop a bit.
Oh, absolutely. You're likely wondering where you even fit in.
Exactly. So we are taking a proper look at how the entire foundation of building a company is changing right in front of us. Like from the reality of what is actually happening on the engineering floor to the brutal math of why half the sauce market is quietly dying while the other half thrives.
Yeah, and the divide between those two groups is accelerating really fast.
Mm-hmm.
And the underlying reasons are, well, they're entirely structural, not just a matter of who has the better algorithm.
Right. Let's get into the guts of that Uber stat because it's wild. Like 99% of their engineers are using AI tools, but the bit that genuinely caught my attention was the methodology. They're not just locking developers in a room to build internal tools in isolation, right?
No, they aren't. The core directive is that engineers have to sit physically or virtually right next to the people doing the operational work.
They're mapping the human friction.
Exactly. Proximity to the execution is literally the only way to build effective automation. When an engineer sits next to an operational worker, they see where the theoretical efficiency of an AI model hits the very real wall of legacy systems, weird workarounds, and just human habit.
Yeah, because if you build in a vacuum, you just build a tool that solves a theoretical problem.
Right, not the actual bottleneck.
But I am still stuck on the sheer volume, though. Like 70% of pull requests. That is like hiring a massive shadow team of junior devs who never sleep. Yeah. But you still absolutely need a master builder to point them in the right direction. So if agents are churning out code at that aggressive volume, I keep coming back to the human cost. Like, what happens to the actual junior developers? Are we just pulling up the ladder and locking them out of the industry entirely?
Well, that is the exact tension tearing through the industry right now.
Yeah.
There's this massive Harvard study looking at the organizational design of AI-native startups.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the empirical findings are quite stark. These companies are incredibly lean, they operate with flat hierarchies, and they are hiring a fraction of the entry-level workers compared to legacy tech companies.
Wow.
Yeah, the opportunity is concentrating violently at the top on elite, senior technical talent.
Which is a bit ordinary, to be honest. We are essentially telling a whole generation of junior talent that their baseline skills are redundant, but if the bottleneck isn't raw coding output anymore, what is the actual skill these senior engineers possess that the model doesn't?
Taste. And the capacity for rigorous verification. Think about the mechanical reality of an agent-era workflow. If an AI can generate like 30 different architectural approaches to a feature by lunchtime, the ability to write the syntax is instantly commoditized.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So the market is desperate for the operator who can look at those 30 outputs, use their accumulated engineering taste to identify the one architecture that won't break at scale, and, verify that the machine didn't hallucinate a dependency.
Right, so you have to be able to finish the job past where the automation inevitably stalls. It's one thing to have code generated. It is entirely another to know if the code solves the human problem without creating heaps of technical debt.
Precisely.
And that mechanism, closing the gap between theoretical AI and operational reality, seems to explain this massive boom we are seeing in forward deployed engineering, or FDE. I was looking at the numbers, and AI companies have committed nearly $10 billion to these specific roles.
Yeah, the FDE model has transitioned from a niche military contractor playbook into the absolute default for enterprise AI. We should unpack that $10 billion figure, because it's not just headcount. It represents the construction of a massive physical moat.
A moat? How so?
Well, forward-deployed engineers are the operators who walk into a client's enterprise, sit with their messy, unstructured, highly proprietary data, and physically wire the base AI models into the company's hyper-specific workflows.
I am going to push back on that being a structural moat, though. Isn't that just incredibly expensive, unscalable consulting dressed up as tech? Like you were just sending humans in to do bespoke integration work.
It looks like consulting on the balance sheet, sure, but it functions as infrastructure. When an FTE team builds semantic search across a bank's legacy mainframes, maps their specific compliance pipelines, and hardwires a non-deterministic LLM into deterministic banking software without breaking it.
Oh, I see where you're going.
Yeah, they become part of the central nervous system.
Ah, right. Is the friction of removal.
Exactly. The switching cost becomes astronomical. No rational executive wants to take on the sheer operational terror of ripping out a bespoke functional integration, completely disrupting their workforce, and retraining everyone on a competitor's stack just to save a few dollars on licensing.
Yeah, no way.
It locks the customer in because the technology ceases to be software. It becomes their operational DNA.
Right. So here is where it gets interesting. You can build the product fast with agents. You can deploy it deep into the enterprise with these FDE teams. But there is a massive assumption there, which is you actually have to convince someone to buy it first.
Yes, the sales problem.
Because when you look at the macroeconomic data, overall software spend is accelerating, but valuations for many of the major legacy software leaders are just collapsing.
We are witnessing a brutal bifurcation in the market right now. On one side, you have AI-native companies aggressively tapping into massive new corporate budgets. On the other side, you have companies running legacy sales playbooks from the pre-AI era, and they are bleeding out because the buyer psychology has fundamentally shifted.
Yeah. The numbers coming out of the finance departments are absolutely ruthless. Like 53% of finance room executives are actively blocking AI spend across their organizations.
It's massive.
They are completely freezing it because they are demanding to see actual, provable ROI. And 62% of them expect to see measurable returns within 6 months. 6 months for enterprise software ROI. They are having a lend.
It is a brutal timeline, but it is the reality of the CFO's desk. Founders are walking into these enterprise deals and selling an incredibly compelling vision to the CIOs or the business unit leaders. The CEO gets energized, they sign off on the pilot, but the moment that contract hits the finance department, the narrative just stops.
It hits a wall.
A brick wall. Finance views AI not as a guaranteed operational efficiency, but as an R&D experiment disguised as software. If your product takes 18 months to show a return on investment, you are dead on arrival when selling to a buyer who demands mathematical proof in 6.
I was looking at how founders are trying to engineer their way around the CFO blockade with pricing. You see companies pricing 50% on raw usage or 18% strictly on outcomes compared to the old predictable per-seat model. But if you are pricing strictly on outcomes, aren't you essentially daring the finance department to prove your software is a bit ordinary?
Basically, yes.
Like if the outcome isn't totally undeniable, they just dispute the invoice, right?
That is the existential risk of outcome-based pricing.
Yeah.
And it strikes at the absolute core of the AI value capture problem. Founders have to internalize where real enterprise value actually lives. It does not live in baseline automation.
Right.
Take an AI claims assistant in an insurance firm, as an example. If you build a tool that simply ingests PDF policies and spits out summaries, you've built a commodity. Any competitor can replicate that over a weekend.
So what does the finance department actually value then? What is the mechanism that proves ROI?
The value is entirely in the exceptions. The holy grail of institutional knowledge does not live in the formal employee handbook. It lives in the exception logs and the silent decision traces.
The silent decision traces. I like that.
Yeah, a truly defensible AI learns the shadow workflows. It learns the specific context of when an underwriter decides to bend a rigid rule because a particular broker brings in massive premium volume. It learns how the really ugly, complex edge cases get escalated, or which senior partner's gut instinct overrides the formal risk model.
That is brilliant. It's not learning the rules. It is learning the unwritten culture of how the company actually makes decisions when the rules fail.
Precisely. When a founder pitches AI into serious enterprise workflows, the ability to provide customer-owned memory, granular audit trails, and specific training controls on those edge cases is not just compliance garnish to satisfy the legal team.
It's the core.
Those specific elements are the actual product. Capturing that silent intelligence is the only way to justify a massive contract to a skeptical CFO.
Yeah, if you are keen on untangling more of these mechanical breakdowns with us, make sure your notifications are turned on so you don't miss the next one. Let's move to the other side of the equation.
Okay.
You have navigated the CFO, you have captured the silent intelligence, and you have won the contract. Now you face the math of keeping them. Which brings us to the part nobody's really saying out loud.
The mathematical reality of customer retention.
Yeah. And I have to admit, I am highly skeptical of these predictive churn tools everyone relies on. Everyone in sauce hyperfixates on churn like it is some dodgy, mysterious weather event that just happens to a business. But when you look at the mechanics, aren't we just throwing arbitrary discounts at people who are already going to leave anyway?
Your skepticism is entirely justified by the data. The way most data science teams implement out-of-the-box churn prediction models is quietly bankrupting companies.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. These machine learning libraries usually ship with a default prediction threshold of 0.5. Mathematically, this means if the algorithm calculates a 50% or higher probability that a user will cancel their subscription, the system automatically flags them for an intervention. Usually that triggers an automated discount code or an expensive escalation to a human success manager.
Setting it at 50-50 odds, I mean, it sounds entirely logical to a developer just deploying a standard library.
It is logical in a vacuum, but the real-world economics of that default setting are catastrophic.
Yeah.
Operating on that 0.5 threshold costs a company roughly $86 per customer in completely avoidable spend.
$86 per customer.
Yes. So if you scale that across a subscriber base of 100,000 users, that single unadjusted default setting is silently draining $8.6 million from the bottom line.
That is insane. Walk me through the mechanics of that loss. How does a slightly miscalibrated threshold bleed $8 million?
It comes down to the asymmetrical cost of being wrong. The financial penalty for missing a customer who genuinely intends to churn and losing their lifetime value is astronomically higher than the minor cost of accidentally emailing a 10% discount to a loyal customer who's going to stay anyway.
Right.
The empirical data shows that failing to intervene on a true churner costs a business about 13 times more than overtreating a safe, loyal customer. Because of that massive 13-to-1 ratio, the mathematically optimal threshold for intervention sits significantly below that 0.5 default.
Here is the analogy that helps it click for me. It is like hiring a bouncer for a high-end pub.
Okay, I'm listening.
If you tell the bouncer to only let people in if he is 100% sure they are VIPs, you keep the riffraff out, sure, but the club is completely empty and you go bankrupt.
Right.
You have to lower the threshold and let a few ordinary folks in just to make sure you don't accidentally turn away the people spending thousands at the bar.
Yeah.
Companies have these massive multi-million-dollar analytics stacks, and they are letting a lazy factory default setting dictate their entire retention budget.
That is a great way to put it. It is a massive unforced error. And the solution is not just tweaking the dial. It requires fundamentally segmenting the user base. The intervention playbook required to save a six-figure enterprise contract is structurally different from the automated email you send to stop a freelancer from downgrading their $10 tool.
Obviously.
If you do not segment the churn data by business model, the algorithm is diagnosing the wrong disease entirely.
But segmenting churn only matters if the underlying business model is fundamentally sound, right? If the foundation is fractured, no algorithm is going to save you, which is what makes the story of the Vungle founder so fascinating.
Oh, absolutely.
He sold his first company for nearly $800 million. But when he started his second venture, he realized his entire initial playbook was a fatal trap. He was running an AI agency business, doing highly bespoke work, and racing toward $10 million in annual recurring revenue. Most founders would kill for that metric, but he viewed it as a dead end.
Because he recognized the structural ceiling of service businesses. Operating an agency involves highly manual, human-intensive work. It generates immediate cash flow, but the valuation multiples are terrible because it doesn't scale without linearly adding headcount.
Right, you just have to keep hiring bodies.
Exactly. He understood that the real enterprise value, the astronomical multiples, they only exist in scalable, pure software platforms.
So he engineers what we could call the service-to-software slingshot. He intentionally keeps the highly manual agency business running just long enough to harvest all the proprietary labeled human edits generated by that bespoke work.
Yeah.
He uses that incredibly rich data to fine-tune his proprietary model and then violently pivots the entire company into a pure software platform.
The mechanical genius of that move is entirely based on timing, though. He executed that pivot before the cultural switching costs calcified.
Explain the cultural switching cost. Why does the timing matter so much?
Because organizational DNA sets like concrete. If you operate as a service-heavy agency for too long, your incentive structures become deeply hardwired for that model. You promote salespeople who are exceptional at closing bespoke, high-touch service contracts. You hire engineers who are great at building quick, custom patches for demanding clients.
And then you try to pivot.
Right. And when you suddenly declare the company is pivoting to a generalized software platform, the internal friction is immense. The top salespeople suddenly have nothing to sell. The engineers revolt against building generalized architecture. The existing culture actively rejects the new business model.
You literally cannot execute a software pivot with a service-minded team.
No, you can't.
And the founder pointed out the massive financial penalty of trying to straddle the line. Like, Vungle tried to serve both the agency market and the software market simultaneously, and they are valued around $4 billion. Their competitor, AppLovin, ruthlessly killed their service arm, picked the pure platform market, and they are valued somewhere between 150 and 250 billion. Serving two masters is a catastrophic penalty.
It proves that beneath all the sophisticated machine learning and pricing strategies, the physical, structural design of an organization dictates the absolute ceiling of its success.
To be fair to the other side of this argument, we can talk about organizational design and data harvesting all day, but navigating hypergrowth is still a deeply irrational human phenomenon. Let's look at the presentation software gamma.
Their growth is incredible.
The metrics are absurd. They are crossing 100 million in annual recurring revenue. They have 50 million users, 600,000 paying subscribers, and they are operating with a team of exactly 50 people.
That is 1 million users supported per individual employee. It is the purest definition of unprecedented software leverage.
And the kicker is they achieved that scale with absolute zero spend on traditional sales or marketing. No massive ad budgets, no outbound sales team. I need you to explain the actual mechanics of how a company achieves that mathematically without buying the attention.
It is governed by a mathematical dynamic known as preferential attachment.
Walk me through the math of that.
Preferential attachment is a network effect, where nodes in a system receive new connections directly proportional to the number of connections they already possess.
So the rich get richer.
Put simply, yes, the rich get richer exponentially. When Gamma launched, their early momentum made them highly visible. Because their product is inherently shareable, users create presentations and send them to other people. Every single user effectively acts as a billboard.
Right.
Once a product establishes itself as the visible default in a specific category, the algorithm of human attention takes over. The market simply hands the dominant player the vast majority of late adopters, completely bypassing the need for paid marketing.
It is a winner-takes-most dynamic playing out in real time. But if you are the founder riding that rocket ship, managing that kind of exponential scale creates a bizarre paradox. We are seeing these massively successful creator-led businesses emerging, where the founder is highly visible. Do you have to turn yourself into the product? Like, are you forced to give millions of users unlimited parasocial access to yourself just to feed the preferential attachment loop?
That is a highly dangerous assumption that burns founders out. The mechanical shift in these modern founder-led businesses is crucial to understand. It is no longer the traditional influencer model of temporarily renting out your audience's attention to launch a product.
So what are they doing instead?
The successful founders are constructing a recurring, self-sustaining world that their audience wants to permanently inhabit.
But you cannot scale the founder's physical time. One human being cannot support 50 million users.
Which is why the architectural challenge is the deliberate transfer of trust. A founder must systematically shift the market's trust away from themselves as an individual personality and transfer it into the company's brand, the team, and the internal systems.
So detaching the founder from the actual delivery.
Exactly. You transition from selling your direct labor or your content to selling scalable access to your judgment. You productize your expertise through premium advisory models, private communities, or software, completely detaching revenue from your personal calendar.
How do you actually execute that internal transfer of trust, though? Handing over the operational reins when the company is scaling exponentially has to be terrifying.
The specific mechanism the most successful growth founders use is recruiting what is termed a near-peer.
A near-peer operator.
Yes. This is an executive who is so undeniably competent and whose operational skills so perfectly counterbalance your own blind spots that you, as the founder, would be genuinely comfortable reporting to them if the corporate hierarchy were suddenly inverted.
Oh, wow, that's a high bar.
It is. You do not just hand them tasks, you hand them the overarching vision, and they synthesize that into the hundreds of granular, daily decisions required to keep the machine running. It is the only way a founder can step out of the operational weeds and focus strictly on the strategic leverage that only they can provide.
It takes a lot of self-awareness to admit someone else needs to run the daily ops. But even if you install this incredible near peer, how do you prevent the actual soul of the company from turning into a sterile corporate environment?
I was looking at the fintech company Mercury. They scaled aggressively, but they managed to keep their internal culture incredibly distinct and tight. How does that happen mechanically?
Preserving culture during hypergrowth is notoriously difficult, but Mercury deployed a very specific mechanical framework. Their first principle is a directive to be weird.
Be weird. That sounds great on a t-shirt, but how do you operationalize being weird?
It is shorthand for demanding absolute authenticity in the hiring process. A resilient culture is built by hiring people who are comfortable operating as their genuine selves, rather than projecting a sanitized corporate approximation of what they think a tech worker should be.
Right.
Their second principle is a mandate to continuously do things that scale. They actively embed their specific cultural quirks directly into their daily engineering and operational workflows. Yeah, if the culture isn't physically forcing its way into the daily pull requests and the customer support tickets, it isn't a culture. It is just a motivational poster in the break room.
Spot on. And their final, most critical mechanism is being ruthlessly uncompromising about executive hiring. There is a common misconception that company culture is a grassroots, bottom-up phenomenon.
It's not.
It is not.
Yeah.
In a scaling startup, culture is violently top-down. If a founder hires an immensely talented executive whose default management style contradicts the core values of the company, that leader-specific department will entirely mirror their flawed values within a single quarter.
Wow.
It does not matter what the founder says at the all-hands meeting. The team adapts to the person signing their performance review.
It always comes back to the flawed, irrational humans you put in the room, which really brings this entire analysis full circle. We started this by looking at the engineering floor at Uber. Like, 70% of their code pull requests are handled by autonomous agents.
It's a different world.
We have access to incomprehensible computing power, AI giants subsidizing massive models, and computation just getting cheaper by the hour. We can absolutely have an AI write the vast majority of our technical architecture.
But the code is just the raw material. It is the absolute baseline requirement to play the game.
It really is. The ultimate trap for any technical founder is believing that a frictionless, beautifully engineered product will just mathematically sell itself to the market. It never does.
No, never.
You can automate the code generation. You can deploy FDEs to automate the enterprise integration. You can even dial in the exact algorithmic threshold to predict your churn. But at the end of the line, sitting across the desk, is a human buyer with a constrained budget, corporate anxieties, and an ego you have to carefully navigate.
The underlying technology is advancing at an exponential, terrifying rate. But the human hardware we are trying to sell it to has not received a meaningful upgrade in thousands of years.
This one shook me a bit, honestly. It leaves you with this quiet, unspelled implication about where we are heading. We are spending billions rushing to master these artificial minds, building massive automated empires. But the most profitable, highest leverage skill of the 21st century isn't artificial intelligence at all. It is a deep mechanical understanding of human nature. Because attention, persuasion, and the transfer of trust, the literal foundation of building a lasting company, ultimately depend on people, not the technology they are wielding. If this got you thinking, give us a follow on Spotify and suss out all the notes over at vocaltechnologist.cu, that's .cyu, Vocal Technologists. See you soon.
Spoken Tech for your ears.